Welcome to Create with Chris. I am Chris Haughey. I want to thank you for joining me today. I am working on a series of street signs for Halloween, and this one I call Broom Dust and Cheeky Bats. It was so much fun to create. I think you're going to absolutely love it. There's a lot of really interesting techniques to make this look a little more mystical and magical. So grab your brushes and let's get started. I'm using my 3/4 oval wash and thinned gentle heather to just kind of slip slap a base coat on the background, pulling from the center out toward the edges. That way it doesn't spill down over the sides. This doesn't have to be solid and heavy. I just want a coverage with a little bit of movement, and I'm just making sure there's no spotty areas. Smooth it out nice and even. I want this to glow from light to dark. Picking up some cherry merlot with the oval wash, starting at the outer edges. It's very, very thin paint, and I'm just doing the same slip slap. I want the center area to be a little bit lighter, so I can start at the outer edge with a little bit heavier paint, kind of spread it around, working very quickly, and then I'll just pick up a little bit more water in my brush. Just use that moisture to move the paint around, just to smooth it out. It's still a little bit messy, but I let it dry, go back with a very, very light second coat, just kind of smooths it out, but still allows that movement to be visible. Next, I'm bumping down to black plum on the toe of my 3/4 inch angle, just to deepen the outer edge. And this is a monochromatic design, so I have to be creative with the way that I use the shades of purple to create that depth and illumination. So by adding this darkness around the outer edge, and especially in the corners, really makes that center area so much brighter. I think you can see such a difference just adding that darkness, and also adds that mystical kind of evening effect to it as well. A lot of water, and don't try to get this all with the first time. A lot of times, especially when working with a bigger area, add a second coat, letting it dry between. I'm splattering it lightly with gentle heather. I wanted these splatters to be kind of twinkly in the background, but not super bright and visible. I'm using a salted caramel to base coat the broom, and just using my 1/2 inch awesome angle. It's my go-to brush for base coating, for shading. It just kind of narrows down my brushes to one, and I don't have to be too fussy about cleaning a bunch of brushes. Using light cinnamon to paint the broom handle, and it's still a really rather wash of paint. The wood color beneath the broom handle just kind of helps to resonate and reinforce that brownness. Using that same light cinnamon, kind of float it across where the broom binder is, and then I'm just using the chisel edge to kind of go up and down. Creates that look of broom straws very easily without having to spend a lot of time fussing over it. Do the same thing on the bottom side of the binder. Float across and then just pull it down. Not being too careful, I just want to get that look of direction of the broom straws. It's just kind of a fun way to add that in there quickly. I didn't want to go with a bunch of different colors, so I'm using black plum to shade the broom handle, and just kind of, I wanted to look like wood grain a little bit, so I tried using the chisel edge of my brush to kind of tap that in. It gives it that look of a little more wood graining. Taking that same black plum on the shaded part of the broom bristles, and I had to be a little bit careful because black plum and yellow sometimes don't play together really well, but I love the way with that light cinnamon buffer in there, it really came through beautifully. Picked up some baby duck, just pulling from the tip of the broom bristles and pulling that up using the chisel edge of my brush. Just have a little bit of paint on the toe of my brush. A little bit of paint makes a big difference, and I'm not just being too particular. I just want to create that look of broom bristles. And I thought it would look a lot more intricate and detailed if I added a few little tiny lines of Snow White and my Epic script liner, just pulling that up. And sometimes it's just that little bit of detail that absolutely makes it look incredibly detailed and intricate. So it doesn't take much, but this is also going to add some highlights. So I'm not pulling it down into the shaded areas, just to brighten those tips up. And I just played around with this until I was happy with it. I don't want a white broom, but I definitely wanted it to look really full. And then I thought, well, that looked really good, so I went back with black plum and my Epic script liner, and I pulled some, I guess I would call it the shadow color, down into the bristles. And you can see how much thicker that makes the broom become. Just looks really intricate. Love the way it looks. The binder, I painted that, or binding strap, I painted that with Gentle Heather. And I'm just using my number 2 Radical Round just to pull that across. And this is a fun piece, so don't let it be too tedious or stressful. I took a little bit of thinned Snow White and just kind of stroked it down the broomstick handle. Because it's thinned, when it dries it's going to be a much lighter shade, and it's just going to create that subtle look of wood grain. Just that little bit of detail adds a lot to this because everything is so simple. Just going to brighten the top edge of the handle up with a little thin float of Snow White. Again, this looks brighter because it's wet. When it dries, it's going to tone down incredibly. So kind of thought maybe I should brighten some of those tips up just a smidge, and adding a little bit of Cherry Merlot along the bottom edge of that binding strap, and a little bit of the Gentle Heather just to brighten that back up, and a touch of black plum. And all my shading is like on the bottom side, on the broom bristles as well as the broom handle. Just going to brighten up some of that wood grain on the handle. When I floated the white over it, it toned it down just a little too much. And a touch of brightness on the broom binding, and a little bit more on the bristles. I kind of jump back and forth because you can see after it dries that whites become very, very subtle. So if I try to add too much brightness all at once, it doesn't, oftentimes it becomes way too much. And by going back and adding a little bit, letting it dry, and then adding a little bit more, I can control the level of brightness, and that also controls the impact. I wanted to stencil the lettering in, and I'm just using painter's tape to secure my stencil to make sure it's not going to move around while I'm stenciling, and I just thought it's easier to use my painter's pal to kind of mask that up. I've loaded my number 5 Spectacular stencil brush with soft black, and I'm using just a very light dry brush, kind of a swirl, to cover that. I was trying to decide how to put the magical broom dust and the wording in there and make it all work out, and how to go around the lettering, and I decided the best way to do that would be to go ahead and put the lettering on. And I'm using my Epic script liner, and this is lamp black and it's not soft black, but I went ahead and used my Epic script liner to connect the letters. I think that makes it look a little more hand painted and less stenciled. I'm loading my number 12 diverse dry brush with Snow White. I just always check it on my finger to make sure I don't have too heavy of paint. I laid the broom where I thought it should be, and I'm just doing a very light kind of a swirl to create that. You can see it starting to evolve. Once I know how much is on my brush, I can increase my pressure and kind of help it to develop a little bit faster. Using a dry brush, you have to be patient. Too much paint, you're going to get a big blob of paint. This is my diverse dry brush. It just came out. They are absolutely wonderful. See, that's too much paint. Make sure you wipe it off. You don't have a big splotch. But it has a little bit of a point on the toes, so when I dry brush, I can hone it in and get a darker center area. It's absolutely perfect for creating any kind of a soft blush for cheeks, for it can be, you can pound it for a little bit of texture, for fur, for grass, that type of thing. It's just incredibly diverse. If you've not watched my video, I do have a video on creating the different things that the dry brush can easily create. It's one of my favorite brushes. Everybody loves it that has tried it, and it's just fantastic to work with. I'm going right over those letters because there's no way to go around them and have it look soft and flowing. So just go right over the letters. It's so much easier. Don't have to worry about going around them. And I'm just going back over it in a game of patience. I'm just going over it until I'm satisfied with how it looks. I did get a little darker in some areas, and I just kind of use my finger to smoosh it out. It ends up being okay, but that's what happens when you're not real patient with it. So keep a light touch. For this, it ended up looking fantastic because I wanted it to be much stronger, so those darker areas blended in perfectly. But just be careful that you don't start out too heavy. It's always easier to go back and build it up than it is to try to go in and lighten it up. I wanted movement in the magic broom dust trail, so I wanted to kind of go up and down and out, and just to create that look that is kind of a crazy flight. And it does take a little bit of time to create this, but boy, look how pretty that is. It just absolutely looks fluffy and dusty, and you can imagine all the different things this phenomenal brush will do. And it comes in, I've got a 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So I use every size. I thought there would be some brushes that I like better than the others, but absolutely use all the different sizes. And it just adds so much, so very easily. Once I've decided I've built up the intensity that I want, I'm going to go back with my splatter brush. And I love this splatter brush because I'm probably about 2 inches away, but I can hone in and direct the splatters exactly where I want them to be. I don't have to worry about them getting everywhere. So you can see I'm just really focusing on that dust trail, and I have to point the brush exactly where I want the splatters to be, but 90% of the splatters will go directly below the brush. It's out of all the splatter brushes I've used, this absolutely is my most favorite one. And I really wanted to make this magic broom trail very magical and have a lot of splatters in it and sparkles. And I'm just using my Epic script liner and kind of doing a little cross. And I have to be careful because my little splatters are still a little bit wet, but I'm just adding different sizes, and I've thinned my paint down so you can see how many strokes I can create before I have to reload. This is my Epic script liner, a little bit longer than a liner brush, but short enough that I still have really good control. And thin the paint down, and you should be able to paint quite a few before you need to reload. And I'm just kind of randomly splattering those little sparkles around, and again they will dry just a little bit lighter. And I didn't like that one, so I could lift it up and redo it. It's just a great way to add a little bit of enchantment, I think is a really good word. And I did try to not put the sparkles over top of the letters. I wanted to kind of space them around the letters, not because it wouldn't look good, but sometimes with the lettering and design it becomes too busy and they it gets a little confusing. Same thing with the dip dots. I'm doing a stronger dip dot in the center of each one of those sparkles, and it just makes it belong, makes it fit into the design really well. And then randomly adding some bigger dip dots around the sparkles. And I have the little tiny ones, which are very delicate and very magical, but the bigger ones give a little more substance to that magic broom trail. And you can see I'm kind of avoiding the letters with the dip dots as well as the sparkles. I just want it to be around, and you'll see why here in just a minute. And make sure I put one dip dot in the center of every one of those little crossover sparkles. And I try not to get them systematically placed, just very random. Random sizes, random placement will look the best. This is such a fun design. It's almost like a painting vacation. You just kind of let it happen. If you're liking what you see, please give me a thumbs up and hit the bell. Please subscribe to my channel. That way you won't miss out on future videos. Let me know if you have any questions. Love to hear from you. I thought it would be fun to add a little bit of sparkles on the broom because the broom's kicking up all the dust, and I thought that should be on the broom too. Now I am going back because I've added all the sparkles. I want to reinforce that darkness in the corner of the plaque and just kind of it helps frame it in. I'm not going over the actual magic dust trail. I'm just kind of going up to it and then around it. And you can see how that really starts to frame that in, creates a little more darkness, just helps to reinforce all of that. Using my 1/2 inch Awesome Angles, my favorite brush to float with. It just adds so much very easily. Everybody has a favorite brush, and this is absolutely mine. I did let it dry really well, and now I'm just repositioning the stencil over top of the previously stenciled lettering, and I'm just going to add another layer of lamp black just to make those letters stand out. And this is just so amazing to see how this turns out. I was so excited. My stencil brushes are a very soft bristle brush, so I can use it to, actually I've used these brushes to base coat with because they're so soft and thick and easy to work with. Just kind of doing a soft swirl. Always wipe my brush over a paper towel before I stencil. It helps remove the excess paint and ensures that all those edges are going to be really nice and clean and crisp. Kind of go between a pounce and a swirl, and you can see that if there's any white edges that need to be touched up. So just take your time and put a nice even stencil over it. And look at that, isn't that awesome? Wow, what a difference. Using my white chalk pencil to stencil some bats on. I'm using, I like the white chalk pencil because it erases with water, so I can put them on there if I don't like where they're at, or when I'm finished I don't have to worry about erasing the tracing lines. This is the Halloween helper. It's one of this series of my Painter's Pals, and I just decided I would use bats off of that. It's just really a nice template, and I can put the bats in there, all different size bats. It's so much fun to have these little templates. Just using one layer of stenciling on the bats. If they weren't real solid and dark, I figured they were in the distance, and that might make them look a little even more distant. So I'm just picked out a couple different sizes of bats, using the Gentle Heather to dip dot 2 little eyeballs on each bat, and basically that is the whole bat. I I didn't add anything else. This is where I'm erasing I did let it dry really well. Then I just went in with water to erase the tracing lines from the white chalk pencil. This is an old stencil. I did a series of Christmas signs last year, and I like that border around the outer edge of the Christmas sign, so I thought I would use that stencil. And these videos are on my YouTube channel as well if you want to check those out. But I could use my number 2 flat, or I can use a stencil. And I'm just popping my Halloween helper up there so I don't get paint any place I don't want it to be. So it just kind of helps mask off that area so I have a nice clean stencil. Using Gentle Heather and my stencil brush to put that border on there. And because I want this to be a little bit stronger, I'm pouncing it instead of swirling it. I did let it dry and give it a second coat to make sure that border was nice and opaque. And it was a little bit bright, so I'm going back with Cherry Merlot. I just want to darken the corners, and I like the way it looks, so I'm using my stencil brush while the stencil is still in place just to deepen those corners, and I did bring it out just a little bit. Be sure to pay attention if you're using a stencil not to get paint anywhere you don't want. Either use tape, or I love using my painter's pal as a masking tool. Just really ensures that you won't have a mess to clean up after the stencil is removed. And I try really hard not to get paint in the areas I don't want, but invariably I do. And I'm just gradually blending out the ends where I want it to blend together. I want those center areas to be a little bit brighter, but I like the way that Cherry Merlot looks. Keep peeking under your stencil. You can see if it's the way you want it. I'm adding just a little bit of Gentle Heather to really brighten up that center area. Also, it covers up any bridges where the stencil is not, has those little bridges. My bats were right where the stripe was, so I decided, at first I was kind of upset that I put the bats where the stripe was, but after I was finished, it ended up being a good thing. So go ahead and let's get that Gentle Heather brighten in those center sections of the center of every section, just to brighten those up, kind of let it blend out, and it just really puts a glow on that. And right there, if the magic broom trail kind of blends in with the border, just put a little float of Cherry Merlot or Black Plum to kind of tone it and separate it out. I just went back with my number 3 Spectacular stencil brush, and I re-stenciled the bats, almost the same concept as the lettering, and that way they'll be in front of the border instead of behind the border. And I love the fact that they're flying over the border. I think that was a really good mistake, a happy accident that they ended up being right where the border was. And I think that really adds a little more movement. So, if you do something and you're not sure you like the way it's going to turn out, let it go and see. Everything's always fixable. So I think that just was a really nice addition that those bats were on there. And there's the broom. Everything's in place. I love how this turned out. Let me know what you think. This is a fun afternoon project. I probably had total time maybe an hour, hour and a half with dry time. Oh, I did go back and dip dot Snow White on I think it's every other letter, just to give and I forgot to cover that bridge there. But let me know what you think. These are so much fun, and I did a series of 3 different ones, so I hope you give them a try. Great project. Kids can do this with a stencil. It's almost fail-proof, and I think these would be so great. You could even hang a set of 3 with like a long ribbon to decorate for Halloween. I did seal both pieces with a varnish, and then when it was dry, I attached the broom using Aleene's tacky glue. Everything I used is listed in the links below. Whether you are a beginner or experienced painter, I'm sure you'll love to do this project. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you see, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. That helps me out, and you won't miss out on upcoming videos. I hope you learned a few new tips, tricks, and techniques to make your painting life a little easier and a lot more fun. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together. And remember, a little bit of paint makes a big difference.